we did a little refactoring, right? Our refactoring was basically we created Yamba provider. Yamba provider is now a content provider. We basically implemented a content provider by implementing, the standard methods on create, on get type, right? And then we provided insert and query, right? So they do something. They insert in the database and query database. I purposely skipped update and delete because you guys should be able to totally extrapolate how to do that. As a matter of fact, that would be your homework, right? So yeah, so you get to do that. That's going to be on the test. Okay. But basically, update is going to give you the URI of the record. It's going to resolve to a URI. This is going to be your values, and this is selection args. You pass that on to the database. You return how many records have been updated, and delete you delete, and this is basically a where statement, right? Now we moved the DB helper into here because this guy used the DB helper. So we basically obsoleted altogether the status data. We deleted it altogether. So we modified Yamba app to now use get content resolver to insert into content resolver, right? Now in timeline activity, we did the opposite, right? We are reading from we were reading the data, and we were reading the data in two places. One was here, right? And the other one was down in the timeline receiver, right? So basically what we did here is we said get content resolver query, blah blah blah. There's actually another way to do that, and that way is to do something called managed query. Yeah. So what managed query does, it looks exactly the same. So look, I can copy paste the URI, right? URI projections null, selection null, selection args null, and sort order is going to be the same as what we had before, and I say cursor is that, right? So as opposed to using this approach, you could use this approach. So I'm going to comment this one out. So this basically, what managed query does is basically supposed to is basically does the same thing, but also manages the life cycle of a cursor. So if we close the activity, something is supposed to close the cursor. Remember that database that we never close and we never release anything, right? So if you say manage query, then that's going to close it. If on the other hand we did, for example, this, if I did close here, so I did get this, if I did db.close, then that moment this would be empty, this would be null. It took me a while to figure this one out. Like I was like, huh? Why is the data disappeared, right? I thought I open up the database, get the data, close the database. The moment you close the database, you release the data. So you can't do that. Right? So so instead, what you do is you do something like this. You say manage query, right? And you get manage query. Now, we're not going to do this either because, as you can see, this has been deprecated. Well, it's been deprecated since Honeycomb, right? So this really depends on which version you're using. But basically, what we're supposed to use is use the cursor loader. Yes, that's correct. Okay. So to do that, you basically use we're going to use the cursor loader that's going to load the query, okay, and it's going to notify us of when it's done, okay. So we can basically create a cursor loader with all this, and we can say load in background. Okay. So once load in background, where's the load in background? Stop loading. Load in background. It doesn't really have that much documentation on that. Let me open it up here. Yeah. So timeline fragment. So basically, what we want to do is we're gonna create. We're gonna do it like this. We're gonna implement something called a loader manager loader callback, so that we asynchronously update our UI when we're done. There's our code. So let's do it like this. So this is the sort of proper way, right? But again, like I said, it only works since Honeycomb. So we are going to say implements loader manager dot, let's see, a loader manager dot, why doesn't it have the loader manager dot loader callbacks for cursor? It's because I have a typo. Implements. They should complete it for me. Callbacks for cursor. You're not getting the loader manager? So sounds like some of us are stuck on the older versions. Remember how I said you can go to the documentation and you can actually do, let me do it here, loader manager. So you can actually turn on the filtering. So you can say I'm committed to 10. Then this would not be available. Right? So it was available on it since Honeycomb, right? And the way, well, I can walk you through how it's supposed to work, right? So what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to init a loader, right? So get loader manager, initialize the loader. Then that has callbacks that are gonna look like on loading finish, you get a cursor loader, and so on and so on. You're supposed to basically return cursor loaders and on load finish, do something with that loader, etc., etc. But you know, if we don't have it, we don't have it, right? Yeah. So we would basically implement methods like this. On create loader, we would do something like initialize the URI, for example, do our selects and create a new cursor loader, right? Why don't I have it? So that's a different story. Loader manager, loader callbacks. Did I change mine to work on older version? No, I didn't. Okay, hold on. So, okay, so I was using the old API. I was based on 10. By the way, if you are using 10, you can still do this via the compatibility labs. Pretty sure. So this is part of the loaders and fragments are part of the compatibility, so you can actually run it on Gingerbread as well. Right. So what I would do here is I would say add unimplemented methods. So this now added these three methods, right? On create loader needs to create new cursor loader. So we're going to basically return new cursor loader, organize imports, date utils. Okay. So, and then this is context URI. So context is going to be this. URI is going to be the URI that we're loading from. So it's going to be like this, right? URI, that's the URI we're loading from. Projection, selection arcs, and sort order. So everything's going to be null except the last one, which is going to be that. So basically, this is ID, I believe, because you could have multiple loaders, ID and arguments. So what I'm doing is I'm implementing that loader manager. Now, again, this is optional. This is for honeycomb and up code, if you guys want to do this, right? But it's an asynchronous way of loading data. That's to answer the question, what if you have gazillion records? And you need to kind of do it in a background. Yeah. How would you gracefully downgrade? I mean, if you create separate APKs, then they're separate applications. There's nothing really to talk about, right? That's one strategy, but it's not the best strategy. The better strategy is to have one code base and to have it, you know, figure out how to run. It's just you would have if statements. You would check for the build. There's a system.build or whatever it's called property, and you could check, you know, how to do it. Like, for example. Like if one was, I would say something like if is it system.build or build dot, I forgot, build dot build dot version or something like that. Build dot version, right? Equal, and then you can basically compare the versions and so on. Right? So you could do things like that to figure out what works. Thanks. Anyone else needs the videos?
Yeah.
Windows. That's it. So that's how you would do it. Or you could, meaning you could knowingly stick to the older code. Right. So in this case, I'm going to do this using so basically, if I am doing it, not doing it this way, right, and not doing it that way, then what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna say get loader manager dot init loader, and then you can specify which loader with what arguments and what callback. So we're not using any ID, so it doesn't really matter. Arguments are going to be null, and the callback is going to be this. So it is this code that's going to call those callback methods. Right? Make sense? So basically what I've done so far is I have defined the this guy here. So I basically said we are implementing the loader manager, loader callbacks, right? That added a bunch of methods over the bottom. So as opposed to what this was option 1, this was option 2, we could have just gotten the cursor here, right? Or we could have gotten the cursor here. This was the worst way because it actually, then we would have to manage the life cycle of a cursor, right? This was a slightly better way because the activity would manage the life cycle of a cursor, right? But it was still bad because everything would happen here. It was blocking. That's why it was bad, right? So we are in on create, so that would mean that we would wait a while to possibly do that. Now, you don't see any problems with our code because we have like what, 20, 30, 50 tweets? But what if we had way more tweets? You get the issue, right? So that's why this is the third approach, right? Is to basically use the call loader manager. So to do that, well, actually, this is the third approach, right? So to do that, we're basically saying get a content the loader manager, initialize it for a specific ID, for a specific if you want to pass some arguments, and ultimately who to call back when it's done. So now the loader manager manages loading. The loader manager says, oh, okay, I'm ready to load up the class. Oh, I'm done loading. Oh, do this or do that, right? Make sense? So the loader manager is now going to say what happens. So basically, on create, we're simply going to return the new loader. So that's where we create the loader. And this creating the loader was very similar to what we did here, right? So this now kickstarts loading somewhere, some thread, right? Presumably. Now, this is when it's done. This is where we now synchronize. This is kind of like on post execute, right? This is doing background, kinda. This is on post execute. You guys get it? Right? So now we can do something useful in here. And usually this is going to be a swap. Usually on finished, you're going to do adapter swap cursor, usually, right? Right. So this would be adapter dot swap cursor, right? So this would be our cursor. So we're swapping, and this is loader. Just Eclipse doesn't do a very good job filling out the blanks. So what happened is the loader finished loading. So whatever cursor was part of the adapter, we just replaced it, right? And then finally, reset loader also happens to be swap cursor, right? So we're going to do the same thing in a reset. So essentially, it's just a different semantics. You have the same code. This code now became this code, and this is now just swapping asynchronously when it's done, right? What do you call that? Loader manager, loader callbacks. Right, so that's gonna call back. These are the callbacks, these three methods that we have. This one is the factory essentially. This happens in a background, on a background thread. This one is back on a UI thread, and this is back on a UI thread, right? So now the question is just how to reset. Let me see. So reset loader is basically starts a new or restarts an existing loader if this is manager. There's a blah blah blah. So basically, what we want to do here, as opposed to doing this stuff, we now want to say. So I'm gonna comment this out just so you can kind of see what it used to look like, and we're gonna replace this with the get loader manager dot reset loader, ID of the loader. I should probably give it some kind of ID. What do we want to call this loader? Status status loader. Okay. Callbacks are going to be, this is going to be null, and the last parameter was who the callback, and the callback is going to be the parent, which is timeline activity like this, right? So let me just define status loader. Sorry, just 1 second. I know I'm bouncing up and down. I just want to define a constant for my loader. So I'm going to have static final int loader, and it can be like whatever, 47. Don't really care. So as opposed to doing minus, so that I'm not confusing you with this number -1, right? Okay. So version 1 was this, right? It was bad because we would have to manage it ourselves, the life cycle of a cursor. We would have to remember to release it and so forth and so forth. Version 2 was better because it was managed, but it was not as great because it was blocking. So if this was taking 10 minutes to load, we would be sitting here for 10 minutes to load. Now keep in mind, content providers are usually backed by database, but don't have to be always backed by a database, right? Make sense? So because of that, that's not a good approach, especially not to block on create, right? Because this could lead to a ANR. You're doing something potentially long. So the third approach was the best approach. So that was basically the best approach, and that was basically to use the loader manager to say just load status loader and call back this, which is that, once you're done. Okay, so that's gonna cause these little APIs to get called on create, on loader finished, on loader reset, right? So basically what we're doing, let me just double check. When I reset the onloader reset, that's really what we want to do on loader reset? No, we want to set null. Yeah, we just have to say null, right? We stop unregistered. That's correct. So so that's gonna swap the cursor. So we basically got the new data, and this is that. Okay. Oh, we don't need this anymore. Change. And we can actually, well, this is null in this case, right? As a matter of fact, I don't think we need cursor anymore. Put the null, right? Because we're not using that variable anymore. Yeah, right? We're not managing cursor ourselves. We have the adapter, we're loading it with a null cursor, but we're kickstarting the loader. Okay, I should probably put this line like slightly below. Okay, so this is gone. And at this point, this may make sense to just kind of reorganize a little bit. So something like that. So basically, these guys are now responsible for managing the loading. So let's start, make sure this works actually before we talk about it any further. So menu. status update. Oh no, okay, test 2, test loader update, that posted, go back, menu, refresh. Works like a charm, right? Are you guys following? So this is sort of the ice cream sandwich, honeycomb / ice cream sandwich feature. But via the, I'm almost sure via compatibility libraries that's available in the older versions as well. So in other words, you could add this as a feature to the older like fonts. Questions, comments on that? So we can now, this now scales, right? We can now handle gazillion records in our database. We can handle like content provider that actually goes is very slow, right? All that stuff we can handle. Got it? Got it? Good. Okay. Everyone any questions? All right. Cool. So what's next? So now that we have all this working, the natural, so let's see where we're at. The natural progression from here would be to do this guy, right? After all, that's partially why we started going down this path of creating a content provider. Although, as you can see, it's not just that why we had a content provider. Also, it had to do with loaders, because previously we would have to do our own mechanism for loading if we didn't have the loaders, right? Make sense? Yeah. Connect to database where you don't have a network connection, but the database is right here in our own realm. So there's no network. I don't care about the network connection. I don't care if this doesn't exist when I'm connecting to a database within my own process. There's no network, right? I mean, there's just a local TCP/IP stack. Actually, there's just a local file system. There's no, you know, it's a SQLite database, right? It's a library. It's not. There's no network involved at all. It could have been that this status provider is actually backed by, you know, some database up in the cloud, right? But now it would work fine because we have all these fancy loaders and, you know, it's asynchronously loading and blah, blah, blah. It would all manage itself well. It can take as long as it wants, either to time out or to load gazillions of big data or whatever it is, right?